You might be getting a message now to ask you if you're okay with this being recorded. We like to record these so you can visit them anytime or share them with colleagues. So feel free to click that OK button there. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. I want to first of all welcome everyone to the Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio professional learning community. This place is informed by district family engagement professionals, and here we learn from and support each other, share resources, and partake in professional learning. So that's our charge together. That's why we're all here today. And my name's Tom, and I'm the project coordinator at the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center. I work with our professional networks and many other initiatives at the center here. So I see some people already doing so. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Today, I am joined by Hadley Bachman, who's going to be our moderator today. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to drop it in the chat, and Hadley will support you as the best that she can. Sorry about that. Okie dokie. So before we go too far, I want to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. So there's no surprises. I like to keep things very straightforward for you all. We're welcoming each other right now. Feel free to check in with any colleagues that you might have missed over the last couple weeks. We're going to have some time to break into small groups and discuss some things from this year. You might have noticed or guessed this is our last fellows meeting for this school year. Now, no need to panic. We already have our dates and things getting organized for next year, or next school year, and we'll be getting back together before you know it. But we're going to take a look back a little bit on the year and some of our learning together. We've had some great times. We're also going to talk some announcements and updates from you all. We are going to talk about the Family Engagement Leadership Summit that I hope you're excited about. Want to get some of your input on that. And then we're going to hear from our main event. Sherry Wilson of the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement is going to talk to us a little bit about how to reframe the conversation around family engagement when we're communicating our work and the importance of our work to families, to colleagues, and to the community. We'll have a little bit of time for questions, and then we're going to take a survey. And I really encourage you to take the survey this time because it's going to help us plan a little bit for next year too. Okay. So we're going to get started with a little icebreaker. And this icebreaker is it's low impact. It's right there for us. But I do want people to think about it seriously and to be able to share kind of what we've gone through this year together, maybe point out some things that have evolved in your practice, some aha moments for yourself. And then this one, people shy away from sometimes, but I want everyone to be able to share something that they're happy with about their organization's family engagement practice this year, whether it was an improvement to something, whether it was getting it into your school-wide improvement plans, whether it was implementing a new practice. We want to hear about it and we want to celebrate it. Okay, so if there's no objections, we're immediately going to jump into breakout rooms here to keep this show on the road. And here comes everyone. Great to have everyone back. Hopefully you had a chance there to connect with some of your colleagues, maybe meet someone new, but at least share some of your experiences here from participating in the Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio group. So before we get going too far, I'd love to challenge some of our friends here to, if you heard something that was either exciting or gave you an aha or something you wanted to follow up with from one of your colleagues in the breakout group. I'd love for you to share out, call them out, give someone some kudos. So did anything come up in the breakout groups that people are excited to share, were excited to hear about? And also feel free to toot your own horn if you have something big to share too.
I can kick us off. So my group had a lot of great things, kind of reminders of some of the things we've been learning along the way. Lindsay actually mentioned about something, I think it was maybe not the meeting prior to this, but maybe the one prior to that, where we talked about like switching the narrative and not focusing on hard to reach families per se, but actually trying to kind of flip that script and figure out, are there ways in which we might be actually hard to reach as family engagement team members, and just really also remembering that a one size fits all type of approach to family engagement does not work. It never has, but especially in these changeable times with the pandemic, we really need to be flexible and nimble.
Absolutely. Great points. Great points. Family engagement happens everywhere, just not at school. So you got to focus beyond school centric stuff as well. Love those points. Other great things that came up.
I will share, Thomas. This is Michelle Tewitt from Tiffin City. This year has been really, really fantastic with being able to push parental involvement and inviting them to the table as a stakeholder with a valued voice. And really just, we're in the one needs assessment process and really have met with our DLT, BLTs, and TBTs. And Tiffin's going through some really hard times right now. In the 7 years that I've been here, we've had 5 superintendents with me as a stand-in for one of those. So yeah, I see the eyes. It's been a very tumultuous time. But the one thing that's remained constant is our fantastic families and this beautiful community that we have. And so being able to kind of push the bar, I told the team, push the bar and say, we need to do needs assessments and surveys and be ready to listen to our families on what they believe they need, not what we think they need, and allowing them to prioritize with natural supports and built-in supports such as wraparound and that sort of thing, bridging the gap to the resources and allowing them to know what's out there and then build an action plan. So we have done that, I mean, monumentally this year. And I think that's a silver lining for COVID for our district. And it's been wonderful seeing the eyes of the educators. For an example, and I'll give another example, we had a family of 5 children who were recently displaced, unhoused right before Christmas, and we had to move them to another district because our homeless shelter had burnt down. So I had to move them to another county, to another district, and they just felt so comfortable here that they did everything they could within their power within 3 weeks to be able to move back here. And so they moved back here. And one of the things that the teachers didn't realize was just because they were able to secure housing did not take away all of the barriers and the challenges that the families were meeting. So they were giving them grades of F and 0 for not signing on during our remote learning times when teachers had work days. And so we just had a meeting and became very transparent. And we talked about how they're looking to fix their car. They're looking for beds. They're looking for a home that's big enough. Dad's looking for a job. Mom has a medical condition. And one of the teachers actually started crying and she apologized to them. And a gentleman who has been very, I'll say, old school, looked at them and he said, your daughter's grade is secondary, if not tertiary, to what you're faced with right now. And I will do whatever I can to support her in the classroom. And it was a huge breakthrough moment for some of our older educators and our veteran educators. And it really helped just kind of show that our families really are trying to do the best they can for the most part. And holding them accountable also means giving them grace. So I love this group. I love how you empower us and you support us to be able to go and do the necessary work in our corners. And I'm just happy to share. Thank you so much for all that you have shared and have done this year.
Well, thank you for sharing that powerful story. I think that's a great anecdote to highlight the power of communication and connection and joint problem solving at, like really a core level. And even in crisis, we can come together to um, kind of identify barriers, identify needs, and address them. But it takes that communication, it takes that first step. And also, we learned in one of our meetings this year, it takes trust between home and school to get to that point. Um, Thank you so much. It's such a powerful story. Um, I'm wondering if there's just one more shout out or something you're proud of from the year before we move on to our next item. Well, that's okay. Uh, I know, though, that there's a lot of great work going on out there, and that a lot of um, family engagement work this year has become paramount beyond us as family engagement professionals, but for our districts, for our schools, for our organizations. And I hope that what we're providing here in terms of learning resources, ability to connect, ability to share, continues to support that. And I hope that you let us know in our evaluations if we can do better in doing that, or reach out to me personally, because that is the goal here. We believe that family and community engagement is a driver to create opportunities for all families and students, no matter the circumstance or place. So that's what we're trying to do here, and I appreciate you being along for the ride. Oh, whoop, that's my announcement. Did anyone have any announcements for end of year stuff or summer stuff or anything like that that's going on, learning opportunities, events that you'd like to share?
Tom, I have one that I'll share just briefly.
Sure.
We have a new course that our center is offering. And I'm trying to get the link in chat here. Hopefully that'll open the whole email to you. You probably received this in your email if you are on our email list. But if you could forward this to teachers and other school-based staff or other organization-based staff in your area, it's really going to be a great free course for people to learn the foundations of family engagement. If some of you are very new to family engagement, you may also want to join it. But it's really designed for people who are new to family engagement. So that might be some of the people you work with. Just forward it along. We will eventually cap the course, but right now registration is open, and we were getting quite a few registrations this morning. So I wanted to make sure to kind of give a little plug to our fellows, because we know you guys are close friends. And we want to make sure you don't miss the opportunity if you'd like to share it with anyone in your circle. So let me know if you have questions. You can just message me in chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for this course. It's been a long time coming, and we're excited to share it. Also, all you professional educators out there, I think you all know how hard it might be to find those professional learning hours, especially for free. So feel free to share that in your networks. We're excited about it. Any other announcements? Okie dokie, no worries. Don't want to keep everybody waiting. Feel free to throw anything in the chat. Feel free to use the chat at any time for whatever you need it for today. But I did want to share our big announcement that we dropped it last meeting. We just gave you the date, but we got things put together now. The Ohio Family Engagement Leadership Summit, hosted by the Ohio Statewide Family Engagement Center. This summit grew out of this group. This was going to be our one in-person meeting of the year. And then COVID happened. And then we started to plan a meeting for us to come together and learn about family engagement from some of the state leaders on this topic. Said, well, if we're going to do it for 100 people, why don't we do it for more? And last year we ended up with 900 registrants. We had about 330 people during the day. But the great thing about this event is it creates learning opportunities that exist long after the event, because we record them, we make sure we archive the resources and stuff, and it's super helpful. But with that, coming out of this group, we also like for it to be informed by this group, because you are the family engagement leaders of Ohio. So you should be informing family engagement leadership in Ohio. So I have a couple quick questions that I'd love some input on from your perspectives. And also I will put these questions in email follow-up too. So if you are someone that processes takes a little more time to process or needs to sleep on things, that you could still feel free to be part of this conversation in a time that's comfortable for you. But I'm looking at this, and first of all, please share about Summit. It's ohiofamiliesengaged.osu.edu/summit. Share that link with anyone. Just like this group, the main audience is for school and district leaders in family engagement. We'll be talking a lot about family engagement inside the school leadership context. However, it's a great opportunity, just like this meeting, for anyone to be learning about components of this practice that are going to evolve their understanding and confidence in family and community engagement. So feel free to share that with anyone. Teachers are great, school leaders are great, counselors are great, families and community members are great. Anyone who's interested in the topic, there's going to be a variety of things to cover there. A couple of things of note before we get into questions 2 and 3. We this year have discussed tracking certain topic areas in sessions so that you could have the opportunity to either select a variety of sessions that meet your needs as a professional, or if you want to do a deep dive on a topic. Basically, family engagement is really intersectional in school. It doesn't really exist outside of anything. We need to have families being engaged at every point of planning, implementation, and evaluation for anything going on in school. So what we've done here is we've made 4 tracks. We have family engagement and mental health. We have family engagement and student transitions, which will be looking at things like the transition into school from early childhood to kindergarten, which we know is super important. I just did a presentation on that, and there is some great data, really important data around that transition. So if you ever want to hear about it, just let me know. But number 2, some things around middle year education potentially. And then also we've been doing a lot of work in engaging families around post-secondary transition. Of course, the goal of education is to prepare people to be happy, healthy, and well-functioning out in the world. So that post-secondary transition thing is important to us. We're also doing opportunity for all, family engagement opportunity for all. How does engaging families create opportunities for all students, all families? And then we'll have a track just for a focus on leadership and engagement. There'll be opportunities to learn on topics outside of this, but we thought that'd be a good idea for people that were interested in tackling kind of one of those issues in one day. So with that, we have some speaker ideas in those areas. We have some ideas for keynotes and things, but whether you went last year or new this year, We'd love to first hear any ideas around speakers or speaker topics that you're interested in. Feel free to open your mic and share. Feel free to drop in the chat and we can talk about it. I know that there's probably one or two ideas. We've about 37 people with us today.
Thomas,
Yeah.
are you familiar with Christian Moore?
No, I'm not off the
He's
top of my head.
amazing. He is absolutely amazing. I want to say he's a licensed social worker, but he might also be a counselor. He did a lot of work over the pandemic on just like being mindful, but also looking at academics and that sort of thing. Also, Joe Hendershot and his wife Darty, they do Hope for the Wounded. We've had them come in and actually do some parent summits, as well as we invited our community networks like our police department and that sort of thing to come and listen to him. They're very profound. And I think that they're priced reasonable. And I would say that they would probably donate some time for the betterment of this group. Also, if anyone is not familiar, Handle with Care. That is a program that allows educators to just kind of know that something happened the night before or that morning at the home of a child, and doesn't give them the specifics, but just lets them know to treat that child with a little bit of grace that day because they're dealing with something.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all those. Got those jotted down here. Other thoughts? I see we got some things coming in the chat too while people think about things they want to share. Family peer support and the certification process. Ren, maybe, well, you might be able to talk about that, right? Why try it is around resilience. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thanks, Ren. We'll talk more about that. Other ideas? Any ideas for keynote or people that you've been reading or would like to hear from? Things in your reading list like that. Okay, well, feel free to keep throwing things in the chat. I have one more question. So part of the day, the way the day is going to be organized. Also, feel free to share on the other things when I stop talking in a second. The way the day is organized is going to be around like 3-hour-long learning sessions, but we're going to have one session that's a half hour that's more story focused. And we're going to be focusing on family engagement kind of in action. And we're calling them power-up sessions. So you get inspired and get the deets on how this looks. And we're going to try to focus mostly on schools and potentially also other organizations that work either regionally or locally. So I'm wondering if anyone on here has a story to tell about their family engagement practice that they think could be impactful. Or if you've heard something from a colleague. We would we'd love to highlight our family engagement leaders of Ohio. We know that you all have been putting in kind of the time to improve understanding and practice and things like that. So any thoughts on any stories to power up our family engagement leaders? thanks, Michelle. You see, we got one volunteer from Michelle, and we heard a little bit about your experience today, the last year or so.
Well,
And I-
Tom, I'm kind of reading the room, and I'm thinking that everybody is really just tired. I'm hoping that's what it is, that it's just a tired Tuesday, because I know that these are some of the most hardworking people, and I do not want to, I don't want to monopolize the whole time, but I would be so happy to share if there's a presentation or something like that that I could forward to you. We are doing great things in Tiffin, and like you said, I know that that's happening across the state. I know that. I know that all of these people that are on here are doing awesome things. So just trying to get everybody pumped up. It's 1:35 on a Tuesday. I get it.
It is, and it's May, which is a wild month for educators everywhere in the United States, I think. Yeah, Hadley also added something here. And how about this then? We got to get to our learning session for the day anyways. This is all going to be packed in email. If you have time to go through that email, have some thoughts, share some ideas about either a story you have, a story a colleague might be able to share, things like that, we'll capture that. We'll get back with you. But I just want to make clear that this summit was so successful last year, and it was born from this group, and we want to highlight the great work that's going on here. So please feel free to connect. Actually, I encourage you to connect with me about this over the coming weeks. But I appreciate you having some thought today and sitting tight while we get through that. But we'll keep moving and keep grooving into our professional learning time for the day, because today we are joined by Sherry Wilson of the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. And Sherry's been a dear colleague to us. She's helped us with a lot of things and has been a great partner in our work. Sherry has been a nationally, or is a recognized expert and consultant in family engagement. She formerly served as the director of consultative services at Scholastic and was a founding partner of the Center for Active Family Engagement, or CAFE. Prior to that, she served as senior manager of family engagement at the National PTA. In other words, she knows her stuff. So please join me in welcoming Sherry Wilson today. Thanks for being here, Sherry.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. And
absolutely.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Let me just turn on the slideshow. Yay, here we go. Thank you, Thomas, for that great introduction. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my background, just because I like to show off pictures of my car mostly, and this is my new car, and I'm really excited about the way the design turned out. But also, you should know that I spent 15 years as the director of the Alabama Parent Information and Resource Center. So the Ohio SFEC is sort of like what the Parent Information and Resource Centers used to be. But then when we had the Parent Information and Resource Centers a long, long time ago, they got zero funded. And so I left there and joined the National PTA, where I managed all of their family engagement programs for about 4 years. Then I spent 6 years at Scholastic. I still do some occasional consulting with them. And I've been with NAFSCI for 3 years now as a staff person. I was actually one of the founding board members as well, so I was connected from the very beginning. I have 2 children who thankfully grew up and moved out and are happily supporting themselves, and obviously the most beautiful car in the world. So that's a little bit about me. Here's some information about NAFSCI. NAFSCI works really hard to advance high impact policies and practices that promote and improve child development and student achievement. We really live to see a world where family engagement is universally practiced as an essential strategy to improve children's learning and to advance equity. That's why we do the work that we do, for no other reason. NAFSCI is a national nonprofit association We are a member-based organization, and we're headquartered in near DC in Alexandria, Virginia. But I actually live in Chicago, so I'm close to you guys. Somebody asked in the chat room if this is going to be available. I will send a copy of my slide deck to Tom, and then he can share it with all of you later, so you'll have it. So the reason we're talking today is I was asked to speak with you about how we frame family engagement and why it's important to reframe it, because the way we've framed it in the past has not been super effective. So I want to ask you, and I can already tell because I was here from the very beginning that you are a very chatty group, but I'm going to ask you to either write in the chat or unmute yourself. And I want to know how you convince others in your school or in your district or people that you know that family engagement is necessary. So is anybody brave enough to share with us? What are some of the ways that you talk about family engagement so that the people you talk to believe we really need to do this? Anybody want to share?
I can share if that's okay.
Thank you, Autumn.
You're welcome. I guess just I like trying to frame it as a very team-based approach. So, it doesn't have to be just the, family engagement specialist or whatever, your title may be. It doesn't have to be just the family resource coordinator like myself. I like framing it as a teamwork approach of like, we need the teachers to be actively engaging with families. We need our families insight most of all. The families are going to be the experts on their own situation. So I like kind of just hitting it from that team-based angle.
Autumn, if I had a gold star, I would give it to you right now. You actually tapped into one of the values that our research shows is really effective, and that's interdependence. When we talk about family engagement as something we all have a stake in and we all have a role to play, we know from the research that works. Particularly when you're talking to educators, it has a big effect on them. I also like how Marion wrote in the chat that it takes a village to launch a rocket. That's actually connecting two of our values. You're using the rocket or the space launch metaphor and the interdependence metaphor, which is fantastic. You guys are doing really well at this. I'm hoping that some of you had the opportunity to participate in our Reframing Institute that we did here in Ohio, so that some of this will be very familiar to you. So let's move on. When we think about how we communicate about family engagement, one thing to remember is we are not trying to persuade people to agree with us. That's really, really hard. It is hard to change people's minds once they're made up, or to persuade them to believe in something they don't already believe in or they don't understand. What works much better is if we activate things they already know that lead to more productive ways of thinking about our issue. And in this case, that's family and community engagement. So I want to talk to you about cultural models, because that's what we're talking about when we talk about activating those ideas that people already have. And the Frameworks Institute, who did a lot of the research for us on reframing, actually thinks of these cultural models as a swamp, because in a swamp, it's a rich, biodiverse kind of place to be. And there are a lot of things that are really good, but there's also a lot of things that are really bad. So cultural models in particular are those things that populate the swamp. These are assumptions and beliefs created through years of experience and expectation. That's why we think of them as shortcuts in the mind. They really help you look at something you may be unfamiliar with and translate that into something you are familiar with so that you can begin to understand it. It's something that happens to everyone. It structures our thinking about information. Some of the key characteristics of cultural models are, first of all, that they're widely shared. That does not mean everybody has the same cultural models. They're not universal. I may have very different cultural models from Hadley, for example, because we have different past experiences that have shaped the way that we think about things. So they're widely shared, but not universal. They're also taken for granted and largely automatic. So when we tap into a cultural model in our mind, we don't even know it's happening. It's usually something that just takes place and it's instantaneous. Another challenge with those cultural models is that they're highly durable. It's really hard to change or get someone to stop thinking about a cultural model or to recognize a cultural model might not be completely accurate. Also, cultural models are multiple and they're often in conflict. So you may have more than one cultural model in your mind, but you take the shortcut that's going to reinforce the ideas that you already have. So that's why when we tap into those, they're instantaneous. We don't even know it's happening. We have an opportunity with that though, because if we recognize the cultural models that people are tapping into and we can raise awareness about where they're wrong, it helps them think about that more intentionally as they're accessing the cultural models in their mind. Cultural models are activated by associated information. If I told you that today or tonight I'm going to go camping, I'm going to be out in the woods camping, you instantly have images or thoughts in your mind about what camping means to you, right? There may be things that you've done in the past when you've camped, maybe positive things. Maybe you're thinking about s'mores. That's the first thing that I think of. Maybe you're thinking about glamping, which is a super fun way to camp. Or maybe you're thinking about sleeping on the ground with bugs and rocks under your sleeping bag. There are a lot of different things that might come into your mind. But when I say camping, you instantly tap into those because you have associated that with information from your own past. The other important thing to know about cultural models is they underlie the public narratives. So a lot of cultural models exist out in the world that have been reinforced over time by public narratives. These are things that are incredibly difficult to navigate around, but if we understand that they're out there, we can tap into the cultural models that we do like that can help people understand our issues better. Some of the common cultural models that are out there that are very broad and widespread, politicians are corrupt or unethical. So if we know or if we believe that politicians are corrupt or unethical, what is the result of that? How is that going to affect the way that people think about government? I'm going to ask you, type in the chat box if you can think of one of the results that might happen if people believe that all politicians are corrupt or unethical. Just put it in the chat. I'll give you a second. Thank you, Maureen. Maureen says lack of trust. Hadley says less likely to trust their intentions. Autumn says people may be less inclined to vote because they feel it won't matter. Yes, so that's what I think too. I get to the place as I think through that chain. Politicians are corrupt. They're unethical. What we say doesn't matter. They don't listen to us because they're all corrupt. So voting doesn't matter because nothing will ever change because they're all the same. And you can see how that thought pattern is really unproductive. It causes people to feel hopeless, like they've got no chance of making a change to the system because people aren't going to do what they want anyhow, and there's no hope. Another common cultural model is that school systems are broken. So if people believe that school systems are broken, then what is the outcome of that? What might that lead them to think also? That it can't be fixed, that there's nothing they can do, that, you know, it's just doomed. They might vote against school levies. Thank you, Hadley. That's a great example. People don't support the work that's going on at the school if they think it's broken and nothing's going to help. They're less likely to get involved or be engaged. They look elsewhere for educational support. Exactly, Maureen. They might question why they should value education. Yeah, all of these things are really bad. These are common cultural models that a lot of people hold. Some people hold substance abuse as a rite of passage, which might lead them to believe there's nothing I can do to stop my kids from abusing substances because every kid does it. It's just going to happen. And that's a really dangerous one, right? The wealthy work harder, so they deserve not to have to pay as much in taxes, so everybody else should pay more. Private sector innovates and the government stagnates, so the government really doesn't do us any good at all. We might as well just burn it down and not have anything. You can see how these common cultural models are really problematic. So we know about cultural models because a few years ago we partnered with the Frameworks Institute, and we asked them to research family engagement for us, and specifically to research how we communicate about family engagement and whether or not that's effective. And in their research, one of the things they did was look for the cultural models that affect family engagement in a broad way across the US. So the research they did was with a very large group. They had people of all different backgrounds, people of all different ethnicities and races. They had parents, families, professionals, lots of different people. And they found there are a lot of gators in our swamp. And there's also an orchid. So let's take a look. These are the cultural models that they identified in their research. First of all, notice the one that's blue. Schools are families. This is an orchid in our swamp. This is a really good cultural model that people tend to have really good feelings about school. This is also one that is commonly held with practitioners. But the orange ones that you see, these are gators. So the challenge we have is, as we communicate about family engagement, we have to avoid the gators and try as much as possible to communicate in a way that will activate that orchid. So I want to ask you guys just to take a minute and see if we have any questions, or if you have any suggestions or thoughts about how you might be able to navigate this swamp. Anybody have any questions? You know, my ex-husband is from Ohio, and I always thought that people in Ohio talked way more than this. Okay, we'll move on, and I will share with you those values. So the framing strategy, well, before I do, let's go back a minute and look at those cultural models. Since we have some time, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about what each of these cultural models mean. Let's talk about the tangible triad first. The tangible triad is when you think of when you think of school and family engagement, often people fall into the trap of thinking it's all about parents, teachers, and students. That's the tangible triad, where we only see those three people as part of the equation. What do you think is wrong with that way of thinking about family engagement? Can you imagine, who are we leaving out when we talk about the tangible triad? Yes, thank you, Hadley. Tangible triad is parents, teachers, and students. Who's missing? Community. Exactly, Maureen. Anyone else? Can you think of anybody else that's left out of that equation?
Lots of resources.
Yes, resources. What about policymakers? Don't they have a responsibility for ensuring that we have policies that create a culture and climate that welcomes all families? Grandparents, exactly, Heather. Parents is very limiting. When we say parents, we're not even including extended families or grandparents or foster parents. So that leaves a lot of people out as well. Heather, great point. Other school personnel who work with the students as well. Let's talk about the care transference, because that's another big one that I often see out in the field. Care transference is when people say, you know, the teachers who care are the most successful, or the families who care are the ones who show up when we have events. They're the ones who are really engaged. So care transference means that if you don't have a caring person, it's not possible for students to be successful. And that really puts the onus on teachers to have to be perceived as caring, and families to have to be perceived as caring, right? When what we know is it takes a lot more than just caring about a student for a student to be successful. If there's not visible engagement, it means you don't care. That's exactly right, Hadley. We don't want people to fall into the trap that when they do and they think it's only about caring, then they think the families who don't attend our events probably don't care about their kids either. And that's why they're not here. And that's problematic because there are a lot of reasons why families don't attend events. They might not have the ability. They may not have the transportation necessary. They may not have the time. They may work multiple low-wage jobs and not be able to take the time off to attend a school event. So there's a lot of reasons, and if we fall into that trap, we tend to blame families or sometimes teachers for not caring enough for students to be successful. Let's talk about culture of poverty, because I think this one is the most problematic and the most troubling. When we talk about things, when we frame things through the culture of poverty, it becomes a very racialized, and we start to think that those families, the families who have less, the families who look different, might not or probably don't engage the way that they should. This is a real challenge, and we need to find ways to get past that myth, so that people understand that all families have deep expectations and hopes and dreams for their children and want their children to be successful. Barbara has put in the chat that the culture of poverty Gator is a real threat to family engagement in Ohio schools. There's a common belief that families of the same income level have the same income, and families with lower income levels are presented in very negative ways. That's exactly right. That is the culture of poverty in a nutshell. And that's not based on research, it's based on stereotypes, and it is very dangerous to think about family engagement in that way. Yes, parents show up at events when they are comfortable being there and when they feel invited in. This reminds me of research that was done by Kathy Hoover Dempsey when she said families need 3 things to be engaged. They need a sense of invitation, that somebody really wants them there, and often that thing is missing. They also need to believe that it's going to help their kid, that their kid will benefit from whatever you're asking them to do, and they need a sense of self-efficacy, that they can do whatever it is you're asking them to do to support their children's education. So it's really important that families have that sense of invitation. So let me ask you again now. Any strategies that you can think of based on what we talked about that people could navigate the swamp? What are some strategies we could use to get away from thinking about the culture of poverty, for example? Anybody have any ideas or want to share? If you're already doing some of that, I would love to hear it.
One of the things, Sherry, and this is Michelle from Tiffin, one of the things that I like to do when I meet a family or I just start to kind of feel out who they are, my culture is Middle Eastern. And so I've been taught to, just to make people feel comfortable, we always use food and drinks and that sort of thing. So one of the first things that I do is we just sit and have a cup of coffee. It sounds simple. It is simple. But we sit and have a cup of coffee, and it amazes so many of my counterparts as to how much can be shared over a cup of coffee. And for many people, maybe it's not a cup of coffee. It could be a cup of tea. It could be breaking of bread. It's just a matter of allowing people to let their guard down in I don't bring them into my office. We sit around a round table or we go to the coffee shop. I always make sure that I purchase the first cup because that's just really important to me. And there have been some revelations with some families of, oh my God, you don't know how much I needed this. Or in one case, I had, there was a question of domestic violence. And when I went to the house, the mom was very hesitant. And I said, are you able to come out for a little bit? Because I would love to take you for a cup of coffee and show you. We have a store called Pay It Forward, which is like a Goodwill without a register, so she could get clothes for her kids. And she said she was very hesitant, but she did. And once we got to the place of coffee, her alleged offender was no longer a threat to her, and she was able to share some stories with me and allow me to get my foot in the door, literally, and and matter of speaking. So just lowering those defenses and beginning a relationship, talking about what we have in common more than what the negligence is or what we're really there to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go with an assumption that they do care. They
Yeah.
love their children. They want the best for their children. And sometimes they just don't know how to get there, whether it be mentally, socially, financially, physically. And so I kind of go with open arms, and I think about, and forgive me if this is offensive to anyone, but I think about the scripture that what we do for the least of these, we're doing for Jesus Christ. And so we just need to put ourselves out there sometimes and be open armed and drop assumptions.
That's a great strategy, Michelle. I love that you take them out, buy a cup of coffee, and have that opportunity to really build trust. Because trust is really the foundation of all of the work that we do with families. That's fantastic. Thank you. Anybody else want to share a strategy you can think of that could help you navigate this swamp? So when we did the research with frameworks, they came up with an overall framing strategy. So this strategy is not designed for you to do all of these things all at once every time you communicate about family engagement. These are the things that will help you tap into or activate the cultural models that will support effective thinking about family engagement. The way you use these depends very much on what you're trying to communicate and who you're trying to communicate to. So the first one is opportunity for all. And what they found when they did this research was universally, this is a powerful statement. And when we frame family engagement as something that leads to opportunity for all, everybody understands that and everybody supports that. America traditionally has been a country where we've been a nation of immigrants that was for people to come and have opportunities. And so people have that in their minds already. So tapping into that makes it easier to help them think about family engagement in a really productive way. Another thing they found when they did their research was when we talk about equity, we know what we are talking about. It's very clear to us what we mean. But when we talk to other people, particularly people who aren't deeply embedded in the world of education, they have no idea what we're really talking about. They don't understand what we mean when we talk about equity. So we have to frame conversations about equity using really clear explanations and concrete examples. There was a video that we watch when we do our Reframing Institute where they interviewed a group of random strangers about equity, and they asked them why, if they think it's important for kids to have equity. And a lot of them were very confused. They were like, well, that's what I get. That's what I have in my house when I'm paying my house off. That's like money, right? So why are you even talking about that related to education? We often just assume when we talk about having equitable opportunities for all kids and all families, everybody is on board with our idea of what that means. This research really made it clear that that is not the case. Interdependence is another value that we found that's super effective. And this works especially well when you're communicating with teachers. If you're trying to talk to teachers about family engagement, often they fall into the trap of thinking that's just one more thing for me to do, and I don't really have time for that. But if we frame it in a way so that they understand we're all dependent on each other, and the more we engage with and communicate with each other and support each other in this work, and that's teachers, families, communities, all of us, the more effective we are going to be, the more effective they'll be, and the more successful kids will be. So that one works particularly well with educators. Having parents advocate about the benefits of family engagement works really well with other families. Turns out when they did the research, they found out that families trust other families. So when you're connecting with families and talking about family engagement, having another parent or family member make that statement instead of an educator goes a lot farther. And then foregrounding benefits to teachers and students. One of the gators in the swamp is narrow benefits. So a lot of people assume that there are very limited benefits in education, and it often falls to the teacher or the student. But if we, and also we can foreground benefits to families, but importantly, when you're communicating with educators, you need to make them understand they have benefits and their students have benefits as well. And you can couple these values together when you're communicating to make them go even farther. So for example, if you use interdependence and foregrounding the benefits to teachers and students, it goes a lot farther than it would if you were just using one of those values. And then my favorite value is the space launch. And the space launch value is a value that Ohio actually embraced early on and made some incredible videos around, which I think you can find on their website. Hadley, you might want to post a link to that in case people haven't looked at the website lately and haven't seen the new video, because it is really powerful. And using space launch helps people understand that there are important roles for everyone to play when it comes to educating a child. Thanks, Hadley. So I know we don't have a ton of time, and these were some activities that I thought would be helpful for you. But I just want to tell you that these are based on some of the cards that are available on famengage.org. Hadley, I think you posted that link early on. Famengage.org has a lot of resources and tips that you can use as you're thinking about how you frame your own communication. This is an example of one of them. These are cards that say, when you say strong family engagement depends on strong relationships, and when teachers and parents engage, they show students how much they both care about their education and success. This is a common message that I have heard over the years, over and over in lots of different places. If you just get engaged, you'll show your kids how much you care. The problem with this is that it tends to have them think about, teachers think about, if they really care about their students, to be a good teacher, they have to be that caring, that love in their hearts is the most important thing. And that parents don't care. If they don't care, they're not going to come. And if they don't come, they don't care. So they fall into that care trap. And we don't want that. So you can avoid that trap by using the space launch. So instead of saying that this all depends on strong, caring relationships, and when we work together, we show kids we care, you could use the space launch and say something like, when students are trying to achieve their goals, it's important for everyone to work together to launch them to success. Something like that, so that it taps into those things, those cultural models they hold in their mind that are effective, that really leads them to thinking about this in productive ways. Let's do one more. When you need to make sure that all families are engaged in their children's education, regardless of their circumstances, that's why we need to take an equitable approach to engagement. So can anybody, based on what we talked about today, can anybody see what's wrong with that statement? Can you pick out one thing that, why would this be problematic? Remember what we said about equity? Most people don't know what we're talking about. They're thinking about their house, or they're thinking about money. They're not really thinking about opportunity for all. So when we say something like this, then people think that that's great, but some families don't engage. Not every parent values education the same way. Some just don't care at all. And what is equity? We don't even know. They are triggered into biased perceptions. Lots of people have them. And so we have to get past that. We can do it if we use the opportunity for all value. So instead of just talking about taking an equitable approach, we're really explaining that, and explaining that an equitable approach means all students have the opportunity to succeed, and we're all working together to make that happen. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if anybody has any questions or comments. Anybody? Okay, well, let me share this then. um, this is where you can find more information about the strategies we talked about today. There are 2 reports on famengage.org. One is Beyond Caring, which is the Mapping the Gaps report. That was the first report that Frameworks did for us, where they really identified those cultural models that get in the way of people thinking effectively about family engagement. The second report was from Caring to Conditions, and that's where Frameworks wrote a brief that outlines the entire framing strategy. So the framing strategy is the use of the metaphor, which is space launch, and the different values that they learned from their research are effective in helping families and communities and educators and everybody else think about family engagement in really productive ways.
Sherry, I noticed a few comments in the chat just kind of digging into that last example. There were some other things besides the word equitable that people noticed. So I don't know if you have your chat nearby or you'd like me to read them out loud.
Yeah, if you could read them, let's talk about them.
Yeah, so few people mentioned how the statement said regardless of their circumstances. And that was placing blame on families, kind of, which would make them feel guilty and might prevent them from engaging. I mentioned also that it sounded really one way. So families need to engage rather than meeting each other in the middle, and kind of that getting to school. So those were the 2 main things that popped up.
Yeah, those are great points. Thank you. Yeah, there's, oops. So all of that came out of our reframing research. I will absolutely share your comments back with Frameworks Institute as well. But I would love to know if there's any other questions about framing your conversations, or about the work we've done with Frameworks, about where I found the Fountain of Youth, whatever. I'm down with whatever.
Sherry, I was wondering, maybe, I mean, you work with schools all over the country, and get to talk to folks all over the country. So which of these suggestions do you find is most challenging for people to adopt?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hadley. I think that when I think about the work I've done in other places, it varies a lot by like region, and particularly by what they're trying to communicate. I think that one real challenge is the space launch metaphor, because people often think I can come up with a metaphor. That's fun. I can come up with my own and it'll be just as good, and I'm really creative. And all of that is great, but it's not research based. And what we know is Frameworks actually tested lots of metaphors, and that was the only one that really changed the way people were thinking. They used a kitchen or a cooking metaphor. There was an infrastructure metaphor. Some of them had some effect, but the space launch metaphor was off the charts in terms of really changing the way people think about things. So that, I think, is a really challenging one to have people wrap their heads around, because we tend to just think, oh yeah, so like a space launch, I could do like a garden. But it's not super effective. I think another one is the foregrounding the benefits for teachers and students. That's a hard one, because you really have to be aware of what those benefits are to be able to do that. And then we're trying to help people understand the benefits. They have to think they're benefits too. So that makes it a little challenging.
I think talking about the benefits to teachers, though, is so powerful because teachers are so busy. So asking them to kind of take on one more thing to have a really powerful reason why, or a set of reasons why, is important.
Yeah, that's why pairing the foregrounding benefits with the interdependence is so effective, because teachers are also really busy. They're pressed for time. It is hard, and especially, living through a global pandemic, that doesn't make it easier. It's more challenging. And often they have families of their own that they need to take care of. So when they understand that, this actually helps alleviate some of the work that they do, because we're all in this together, and the benefits are really, really powerful in terms of student outcomes and opportunities for teachers to really, elevate the work that their students are doing. It's incredibly powerful.
So I see in the chat we just had a thing come in, and I'd like to make a comment about it that connects this whole presentation. And the thing was, who wouldn't agree that schools need to embrace family engagement? It's a no-brainer. And I've heard similar things. Actually, like a year ago, I tried to explain my job to my aging grandfather, and he asked why I have a job that's just common sense, right? That people would like work together to help children. But I think that question is why, as professionals, this reframing the conversation work is so critical. If you will, think about this kind of like an elevator pitch for whether you're starting a project or trying to explain your career or job to someone. If you're not done and hitting the high points in 60 seconds or so, you're just going to lose people. It becomes convoluted. People don't have time to listen. The Obviously, we all in this room think family engagement is important, but if we're not able to express it in a quick, succinct, and powerful way that connects and resonates with people that aren't thinking about this all the time, then we will keep being faced kind of with this question of people. So I really encourage people, even though this might not go out there and like be something that is going to be something you write into your school plans and implement and think tomorrow, like a big practice or something. This is something that's critical for us in our professional profile to be able to be creating conversations about the significance of this and knowing the high points of the research and of these findings to really make the case to people. As Sherry pointed out, we're not trying to change minds, but really be able to present what we do and why this is significant to us and for families and students.
Yeah, I like to think of this as a way to, so we talk about activating effective thinking, but I really think it's a way to help people embrace the right thing to do, because once they understand what we're talking about in a way that, you know, that really taps into those previous cultural models that are positive, once they understand it, everybody supports it. It absolutely is a no-brainer. But I've had to do this work for, gosh, over 25 years now, which I know you don't believe it to look at me, but it's true. And the reason why is because we still have to convince people. We haven't been doing a very good job of communicating why family engagement is important beyond our own field, beyond those of us who already believe in this. And so it's time for us to start using some of this research and changing the way we communicate, so that eventually I might be able to retire one day and go to a castle where I belong in the Alps. But in the meantime, this is really good research that we can all use to start to change the way we communicate. And if we do that across the state in Ohio, and we're also starting to do it across the state in Colorado, and we just had another Reframing Institute today in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and we're going to be doing it across the state there. Eventually, this will be a groundswell, and people will all be communicating this way, and we will be able to change the way that people think about family engagement, so we can really advance those policies and practices that support the best possible student outcomes. Boom. I wish I had a microphone.
Thank you, Sherry. And And I thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing this important information. I encourage everyone here to thank Sherry in the chat. I will pick your brain on just one more question while you're here before we move on to business. Something came in and a question here at the last second, and I think it's interesting. And you mentioned something about policymakers earlier. Have you seen this, or do you view this as research that could be leveraged in something like a levy campaign or by a policymaker who might be petitioning for some type of either legislation or something related to family engagement? Not that I'm advocating for that, but how do you see that working?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you can leverage these strategies to change the way people view family engagement so they start to see it as something that's possible and desirable. And then it's easy to convince them that we need additional resources or better policies or practices that create cultures in schools that are welcoming to all families. I think that that is the key to it, though, is you have to be able to use these strategies with the appropriate audience. This is not like a script. It's not a one size fits all thing. It is really a series of strategies that you can use when you're communicating about family engagement, depending on who you're communicating to and what you're communicating about.
Absolutely. Thank you. And there you have it. Once again, that is Sherry Wilson from the National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. And thank you so much once again. So powerful. And as I said before, critical for us in terms of being able to communicate our work, the significance of our work, and the significance of the work for students and families.
Thank you, Tom. And I just wanted to say I put my email in the chat box. I love to communicate anytime about anything. So feel free to reach out to me and happy to communicate with you.
Very cool. Take advantage of that. It's not every day that people that have experience working for the National PTA and Scholastic and other national organizations just hand out their emails. So put that one in your Rolodex and let's keep on moving. We have a couple minutes left here. I appreciate everyone stopping by today. We had a really good turnout for this important conversation. Wanted to just pause for a second and see if anyone had anything to share after hearing that or had additional questions that come up from before.
I just wanted to say we just passed a levy in our district, and I feel like family engagement was a huge part of the reason why it passed. The district that I live in is like considered a wealthier district, not always the districts that I work with, but one where we live, and levies, the school levies don't always pass. We have a lot of retirees that live here on a fixed income, and so we don't always get the support that we're looking for, but there was a real push for parents to get out and vote. And the parent turnout for this levy, the percentage was really, really high because of the push from the school district to support the school. So I think it is definitely something that can be used to support schools. I wish that we could figure out more ways to get other community members involved in our district. That would be great.
Absolutely, and maybe a topic for another day. Focus on community engagement and stakeholder engagement, but also always a great lesson. I think if you review why lots of levies fail, it has to do with people not understanding what it's for, and them not talking to anyone about it. And sometimes that can be a problem. So I'm really glad to hear that we know how challenging those issues can be, especially today. People in a lot of different financial circumstances. Other thoughts from today?
I actually had a thought jumping back to some of the questions you had asked earlier about any thoughts on speakers and things like that. So I actually just was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to attend a professional development featuring Dr. Adolph Brown. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with him, but he's wonderful. So I have not had the chance to totally read through this book yet, but I started a little bit and he talked quite a bit about it in the professional development. So the title is called Two Backpacks: Learning Their Story and Building Relationships with a Trauma-Informed Perspective. So he really just kind of got into talking about how students come to school and they're always carrying two backpacks. They're carrying the one that they let us see, and then they're carrying the one with all the emotional, baggage and maybe trauma they've experienced, anything like that. And we don't always get to see how full and overflowing that one is. So just being really mindful that we're helping students and families take things out of their backpacks and not feeling like we're putting more in. So it was a wonderful professional development opportunity. So, and he has another book as well called Championship Habits. So you may want to check out those books if nothing else.
Absolutely, it's appreciated.
Thanks.
Well, one thing that I'd love for you to do, first of all, I just want to take one moment to say thank you to you all for being here, not just today, but this Family Engagement Leaders of Ohio group this is the completion of the second year of being in existence and providing space for family engagement leaders in Ohio to come together to share their practice and continue to learn together and grow. And I want to just, number one, thank you all for taking time out of your immensely busy schedules and lives to participate, as well as providing a really enriching space for myself as well as others to participate in. It's been a really lovely experience getting to know all of you and your work. And I think that we're just really getting started here. Like I said, you'll be hearing from me in the next couple days with a follow-up, as well as some hints as to where we'll be headed in next year. But in the meantime, stay connected with us throughout the summer. I hope all of you are connected to our newsletter. I hope all of you are connected to some of our professional learning events and things of that nature. But I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, and that I thank you for everything that you do in your jobs and careers. And I hope that those of you that will be on vacation this summer from school enjoy it and have some time for yourself to recuperate. And those of you that are going to keep on grinding through the summer, that you still find some space to take care of yourself and enjoy, hopefully, the good weather that'll be coming at some point. The last thing I want to do today, it's so important for us all at the center to keep improving and make sure these are meeting your needs. We don't want to be providing anything that's wasting your time. So if you could please take our survey here, it's really important. It'll help us get speakers in order for future meetings, inform the summit, as well as make good on any type of problems or suggestions that you have. So please, this shouldn't take too long. We have about 3 minutes left. If you could knock it out right now, that'd be perfect. And with that, I'll just leave you to have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. It was great to see you all, and we'll be in here for a little bit if you have anything to chit chat about or have a question or anything. So take care.